Ladies, stop waiting to be chosen. Stop asking to be respected. Stop pleading to be seen. The most powerful women in history were not the loudest in the room. They were the ones who understood the strength of restraint, the elegance of silence, and the deadly allure of control. This isn't about manipulation, this is about mastering yourself so deeply that your very presence becomes unforgettable, not because of what you say, but because of how you move, how you respond, and how you withhold. This is dark Stoic psychology, where your silence becomes your sharpest weapon and your standards become the battlefield. So if you're tired of being overlooked, undervalued, or misunderstood, lean in, because these 10 silent actions will make anyone sit up, pay attention, and respect you, not because you asked them to, but because you commanded it without a word. Most people underestimate the raw magnetic power of stillness in a relationship. We live in a world that teaches us to perform, to be louder, sexier, more expressive, more giving, more everything, just to hold someone's attention. But that kind of performative intimacy is temporary. It burns fast and dies faster. What actually sustains desire, what keeps someone hooked to your presence without even knowing why, is the sensual power of stillness, your ability to hold space, to remain composed, to not flinch in moments of intensity. It's not about being cold or distant, it's about being deeply rooted in your energy, so secure in your value that you don't need to chase validation, even in the most intimate moments. Imagine this, two people in the same room. One is fidgeting, seeking reassurance through words, eager to fill the space with noise. The other, she's calm. She doesn't rush to speak. Her body language is relaxed. She doesn't force eye contact, but when it happens, it's deliberate. She listens more than she talks. She responds with subtle shifts rather than exaggerated gestures. That woman owns the moment, not by taking control overtly, but by silently inviting the other person into her grounded presence. And that's what makes her unforgettable. In sex and emotional intimacy, this energy becomes magnetic, because stillness isn't passive, it's powerful. It's a silent declaration. I am here. I am not moved. I don't need to perform to be valuable. Stillness and intimacy isn't just about slowing down physical movement, it's about emotional mastery. Most people bring their anxious energy into their romantic dynamics. They touch too quickly, they speak too soon, they rush to kiss, to explain, to define. But when you can sit with someone in the quiet, without needing to rush to the next sensation or assurance, you're teaching them something. You are not afraid of depth. You are not afraid of silence. You are not afraid of what intimacy actually is. Presence, vulnerability, and restraint. Those who crave real connection will feel pulled into your energy, like gravity, and those who thrive on surface-level stimulation will feel uncomfortable in your stillness. Either way, your energy filters out who is truly aligned with your value. Your body, your breath, your pacing, everything becomes a message. When you move with intention and hold stillness when others expect urgency, you stand out. Not just sexually, but emotionally, psychologically. You're not reacting, you're inviting. You're not performing, you're embodying. This is especially powerful in a world where people are used to constant overstimulation. In the bedroom, a woman who doesn't rush, who pauses before being touched, who breathes deeply during closeness, who can hold eye contact without trying to please, triggers something primal. She signals safety and strength. She tells a silent story. I know my worth, and I choose how far we go. Stillness also creates tension, delicious, maddening, unforgettable tension. That moment when your partner leans in to kiss you and you pause, just a second longer than expected. That moment when you look them in the eye and don't say a word, but your breath, your presence, your subtle smirk say everything. That moment when you're being touched and you don't immediately respond with noise or motion. You feel, you absorb, you breathe it in slowly. These are the moments that burn into memory, because anyone can give their body, but very few can hold space with their energy, with their restraint, with their control, with their silent confidence. When you're deeply still in intimacy, you become the mirror for someone else. They start to notice how frantic their energy feels around yours. They begin to slow down, not because you told them to, but because your presence invites them to. You set the tone, you guide the connection without force. And this doesn't just apply to sex, it applies to emotional connection too. When your partner is anxious, reactive, or overwhelmed, and you stay centered, breathing, quiet, yet emotionally available, you teach through embodiment, you model regulation, you bring calm to chaos, depth to surface-level interaction, and security to shaky dynamics. People remember how you made them feel, and when your presence feels like safety, when your silence holds more intimacy than words ever could, you stop becoming an option, they attach. Stillness is not the absence of power, it is the refinement of it. The more comfortable you become with your own silence, the more powerful you become in someone else's world. You become the calm in their storm. You become the pause they never knew they needed. You become the person who doesn't demand energy, but naturally pulls it in. Your stillness is not weakness. It is mystery. It is command. It is erotic. It is secure. When you master that, you stop being just another interaction and start being the experience they compare everything to. Most people believe that passion is in the heat and the reaction and the explosion of emotion, but the truth is, what separates superficial intimacy from deep emotional and sexual connection is your ability to respond, not react. In relationship dynamics, especially in vulnerable moments of intimacy, how you regulate your emotions directly shapes how desirable, safe, and memorable you become. The one who reacts impulsively is controlled by their environment, but the one who responds with intention, who takes a breath, who pauses, who chooses calm over chaos, holds the power, even in silence. This is the key that makes people lean in and crave more. Your energy doesn't just match theirs, it transcends theirs. When someone pushes a boundary, when tension builds in an argument, or when emotional conflict arises, most default to reactive behavior. Words fly, voices rise, energy spikes. But when you pause, lower your tone, and choose stillness over spiraling, you disrupt the entire dynamic. You signal that you're not emotionally dependent on their reaction to validate your value. That's power. In sex and emotional closeness, this shows up as a form of erotic leadership. You don't need to chase sensation. You don't need to match frantic energy. Your calm becomes the control center. You respond with awareness, with grace, with intention, and that makes your presence irresistible. The moment someone expects you to crack, and you don't, is the moment they realize they're dealing with a different kind of energy. Not the one who demands love, but the one who decides who is worthy of accessing it. When you respond instead of react, especially during moments of vulnerability, disagreement, or emotional overwhelm, you become an anchor. This creates contrast, because the world is full of chaos. People yelling, over-texting, oversharing, oversaturating. When your energy is composed, thoughtful, and measured, it shocks the system. You stand out in relationships. That kind of emotional command becomes addictive. It tells the other person, you're not owned by your feelings, you own your feelings. And in the world of intimacy, that's magnetic. Think of the last time someone snapped at you, expected you to defend yourself, or tried to get a rise out of you. The instinct is to fight back, to over-explain, to seek validation. But when you don't, when you let the silence speak for you, when you choose not to engage in chaos, your presence becomes unsettling in the most seductive way. In those moments, you say without words, I'm not here to win arguments. I'm here to protect my peace. And if your energy doesn't match that, I won't lower mine to meet yours. That kind of restraint in relationships is misunderstood by many, but felt deeply by the emotionally intelligent. In the bedroom, this manifests in how you guide the energy between you and your partner. It's in the way you read body language. It's how you slow things down when they speed up too fast. It's how you move with awareness, with subtle shifts in tone and breath. Instead of chasing a climax like a destination, you feel, you sense, you guide. You respond, not just with your body, but with your consciousness. When someone touches you, you don't react out of habit. You absorb the moment, read it, decide how you want to receive it. This isn't passivity, it's presence. It's choice, and it makes your energy feel sacred. Response over reaction is also what prevents emotional manipulation. When someone tries to provoke jealousy, test your limits, or create emotional insecurity, your immediate reaction is the weapon they want. But when you step back, observe, and respond with grace or silence, you're no longer a puppet in their emotional theater. You become untouchable, not because you don't feel, but because you choose what deserves your energy. That control makes you unforgettable, not cold, not unmalleable, just refined. Even in conflict, especially in conflict, the ability to stay calm and present sends a message that can't be ignored. I've done my inner work. I don't bleed on people who didn't cut me. I don't fight to be seen. I don't perform for attention. That level of emotional containment is what deepens intimacy, because your partner begins to trust that you won't explode when things get tough. And when they can trust you in your emotional storms, they open up in theirs. Trust is built when someone sees that your emotional center doesn't collapse under pressure. They feel safer going deeper. They feel freer expressing their own shadows. Your response becomes their roadmap to safety. And let's not forget, true eroticism lives in awareness, not in reaction. The ability to feel every moment without being consumed by it, to express desire without losing control. To make someone feel seen without abandoning yourself. That's the kind of presence that lingers. That's the kind of energy that haunts memory, in the best way. When you touch someone not out of need but out of conscious connection, they feel it. When you kiss slowly, not to please them but to explore the moment fully, they crave it. When you make eye contact during silence, not to read them but to meet them, they stay hooked long after the lights are off. This is how emotional intelligence becomes erotic intelligence. This is how restraint becomes intimacy. And this is how silence, breath, and measured response become more powerful than any scripted phrase or performative act. Because in a world obsessed with attention, your ability to remain unmoved becomes the most intoxicating presence in the room.
Nice try.
There's a reason why mystery creates obsession. When someone believes they figured you out too quickly, they stop leaning in. But when you hold something back, just enough to keep them wondering, just enough to keep them reaching, they stay hooked, not because you gave them everything, but because you didn't. In relationships and intimacy, mystery isn't manipulation. It's a form of psychological seduction. You're not hiding who you are. You're mastering when and how much of yourself to reveal. That restraint becomes intoxicating. Because anyone can bare their soul on the first date, pour out their trauma, or lay out their entire emotional blueprint in a single conversation. But the woman who keeps something sacred, she's the one who lingers in their mind. You don't have to say everything you feel. You don't have to reveal every wound. You don't have to expose every part of yourself to be deeply loved or desired. In fact, when you practice selective vulnerability, revealing with intention, not desperation, you actually create more space for trust and curiosity. People confuse intimacy with overexposure. They think that telling someone everything instantly will accelerate connection. But true connection isn't built in the flood. It's built in the slow, intentional uncovering of layers. Each glance, each word, each pause becomes part of the dance. And when your partner feels like they're discovering you, rather than being handed your entire emotional history on a platter, they stay present in the experience. Mystery is not about distance. It's about pacing, emotional pacing, physical pacing, spiritual pacing. You don't need to overwhelm someone with intensity to make them feel close to you. You only need to offer glimpses, true, honest, emotionally potent glimpses, while still holding a part of yourself untouched. And it's that untouched space, that internal world, they can sense but not fully access, that builds desire. Because once someone feels they know everything, the chase dies. Not because you're no longer valuable, but because the unknown always holds more allure than the familiar. People don't stay addicted to what's predictable. They stay addicted to what feels just out of reach, but close enough to taste. In sexual intimacy, mystery is everything. It's the pause before the touch, the way you look at someone without immediately leaning in, the silence between breaths, the delayed gratification, that split second where they think you're about to give more, but you don't. Instead, you pull back slightly, breathe deeper, stay still. That space creates hunger. That space creates power. Most people are so quick to give their bodies in full, hoping it'll secure love. But what really creates lasting desire is when you give slowly, intentionally, so that every moment becomes a discovery. Every gesture feels like a privilege, not a given. It's not about withholding out of fear. It's about revealing out of value. And it doesn't stop in the bedroom. Mystery and emotional connection is just as vital. Don't always be the first to text, the first to ask, the first to plan. Don't always fill the silence. Don't always say yes. Sometimes it's in your pause, in your absence, in your unpredictability, that your presence becomes louder. When they're used to your warmth and suddenly feel a shift, when they can't read you fully, they begin to reflect more deeply. They wonder what you're thinking. They play back your words. They search for clues in your energy. That's not manipulation. That's the psychological tension that builds emotional investment. And investment is what leads to attachment. The woman who maintains her mystery never becomes background noise. She remains an experience, a presence, an emotional puzzle. She's not easily figured out. She doesn't explain herself constantly. She doesn't need to be understood right away to feel seen. And that's where her power lies, because she understands that the most powerful intimacy isn't loud or predictable. It's layered, it's earned, it's grown slowly, deliberately, over time. She knows that once someone tastes depth, they'll crave it. But if they gulp it down too fast, they'll never truly appreciate it. When you become emotionally mysterious, you force others to listen not just to your words, but to your energy, your silence, your shifts. You pull them into presence. You train them to become more attentive. You invite them to connect with the essence of who you are, not just the surface. In a world addicted to instant gratification, that kind of experience is rare, and rare becomes unforgettable. Even your emotional honesty becomes more valuable when it's not always accessible. When you finally say how you feel, it carries weight. When you finally cry or open up or share that one fear or longing, it shakes them because they know it wasn't a performance. It was earned access to your heart, and that moment lives in their body. It gets stored in their memory as something sacred, something real. Mystery isn't about playing games, it's about protecting your soul while inviting connection. It's about letting someone work for closeness, not because you're testing them, but because you understand your worth isn't on sale. It's about showing just enough to create gravity, but never so much that they stop being curious. Because once someone thinks they've figured you out, they stop discovering. And once they stop discovering, they stop valuing. Your mystery is the invitation. Your pacing is the container. Your silence is the spark. And your energy, undiluted, unexplained, unapologetically held close, is what keeps you unforgettable in both love and lust. There's nothing more commanding in relationships than the quiet act of setting a boundary without explanation. In a world where people are constantly negotiating their self-worth, over-explaining their feelings, and justifying why they don't accept certain behaviors, there is an undeniable power in the woman who simply acts. She doesn't announce the boundary. She doesn't seek approval. She just shifts her energy, her body, her presence. That shift alone speaks louder than any speech ever could. In intimacy, this level of silent self-respect becomes the ultimate signal. It tells the other person, I know myself, I trust myself, and I don't need you to agree with what I need in order for me to honor it. Most people associate boundaries with confrontation, but real power doesn't always need confrontation. It needs clarity, especially in emotional and sexual intimacy. When you can assert your needs through your actions, you're not being cold, you're being aligned. You're saying, I don't owe you my body, my time, or my vulnerability just because you want it. And that subtle but bold refusal to overextend is the very energy that commands presence, commands respect, and paradoxically deepens desire, because mystery alone isn't enough if it's not rooted in value, and boundaries are how you enforce that value silently, consistently, and without apology. Think about how often women are taught to cushion their no, to smile through discomfort, to justify why something doesn't feel right. But when you drop all of that and simply remove yourself emotionally, energetically, physically from situations that disrespect your inner world, you shift the dynamic. You teach the other person, without a single word, that your intimacy is earned, that your softness has prerequisites, that your energy isn't for those who fumble it. This is not cruelty. This is emotional maturity. It's erotic authority. And in romantic dynamics, that kind of quiet, anchored energy becomes unforgettable. Imagine this scenario. Someone crosses a line with you, not aggressively, but subtly. Maybe it's a dismissive comment. Maybe they take your presence for granted. The average person might call it out, explain how they feel, ask for validation. But a woman rooted in her power doesn't plead to be respected. She simply withdraws. She doesn't punish or create drama. She just changes her behavior. She's less available. She gives less energy. She creates distance. And that distance isn't filled with resentment. It's filled with clarity. That silence becomes louder than any confrontation. It makes them feel the consequence of crossing a line without you ever raising your voice. In intimacy, this boundary setting creates a new level of erotic tension. It's the moment where your partner realizes you won't tolerate half-hearted presence, that you're not afraid to walk away from affection that feels conditional. You don't force connection, you invite it. And if it doesn't meet you in depth, you don't shrink, you step back. This is the behavior of a woman who understands that true closeness must come with safety, not just physical, but emotional. And emotional safety is only possible when you stop explaining why your boundaries exist and start embodying them. In sex too, this energy is potent. When you move someone's hand, when you slow down the pace, when you stop and say nothing but make it clear, something isn't aligned. You are commanding the room without raising your voice. You're showing them your body is not just a place they visit. It's a space with rules, reverence, and rhythm. You don't have to perform. You don't have to tolerate discomfort for the sake of pleasing. Your silence, your shift, your control over the experience. All of it tells them they are not in charge of your pleasure. You are. And when that message is delivered without drama, it's not just sexy, it's offense. This doesn't just influence desire. It shapes how someone relates to you. When you act on your boundaries without the need for recognition, people begin to adjust to your standard. They think twice before pushing. They reflect before overstepping. Not because they're afraid, but because they feel the difference in your energy. There's a weight to it, a stillness, a certainty that says, I've left people I once loved for less. That energy isn't spoken, it's sensed. And in a relationship, it creates a container of respect, so strong the connection can't help but deepen or dissolve. The most attractive energy isn't desperation, it's discernment. It's the moment when someone realizes you don't chase affection, you filter it, you don't beg for love, you curate it. And when you stop announcing every emotional boundary and start embodying them through quiet but decisive action, your very presence becomes a test of emotional intelligence. The ones who aren't ready will feel the burn of that distance. The ones who are ready will meet you there with care, with awareness, and with reverence. And what's more intimate than someone who respects the space you protect around your heart? What's more magnetic than being close to someone who doesn't need to prove their value because they live it in every gesture, every vase, every moment of intentional withdrawal? You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to explain to be understood. You only need to move differently. That movement, that sacred silence, that refusal to over-accommodate, that's what sets you apart in a world where everyone else is still asking to be seen. Eye contact is one of the most erotic, disarming, and emotionally commanding forms of silent communication in any relationship. It doesn't just reveal, it pulls, it pierces through small talk and bypasses surface connection. When you hold someone's gaze, especially in a moment where words would normally fill the space, you're not just seeing them, you're inviting them to see you. And in that still, unspoken moment, something powerful happens. The dynamic shifts. You're no longer seeking approval or connection. You become the connection. And that is when intimacy moves from transactional to unforgettable. Most people underestimate what they can say without speaking. They rush through moments, distracted by what they should say next, afraid of the silence, afraid of being too much or not enough. But the one who can hold a gaze without flinching, without over-explaining, without apologizing for their presence, she becomes magnetic. She becomes the one who doesn't need to chase or convince. She just is. And in relationships, that kind of steady, grounded energy creates an anchor. The other person can't help but slow down, notice more, lean in, because suddenly they're not being fed emotion, they're being invited to feel it. There's something haunting about a woman who can look at someone and hold space for them without saying a word. Her eyes communicate what her mouth doesn't need to. They say, "I'm here, I see you, and I don't need to beg to be seen in return." In intimate moments, this is amplified. Imagine lying next to someone, breathing slowly, and instead of immediately touching or speaking, you just look, not to perform, not to seduce, but to be fully present. That gaze becomes an invitation. It says, "Be with me, feel this moment, see me without distraction." That kind of presence creates tension, so thick it vibrates beneath the skin. Holding eye contact isn't about dominance, it's about presence. It's about not shrinking in the face of vulnerability. It's about refusing to look away when connection feels too intense. Most people avoid eye contact not because they don't care, but because they're afraid of being seen too deeply. And when you break that norm by staying with the gaze, when you remain emotionally naked without blinking or explaining, you open the door for a deeper kind of trust. It tells the other person, "You're safe to be real with me, because I'm not afraid of seeing you, and I'm not afraid of being seen." This presence in your gaze also speaks to how emotionally available you truly are. You can say all the right things, send all the right messages, even touch all the right places, but if your eyes are guarded or disconnected, your partner will feel the gap. And when your eyes are aligned with your emotional truth, when you look softness with clarity, with quiet certainty, your entire energy shifts. You become someone who doesn't need to force closeness. You become closeness. You radiate a kind of warmth and awareness that draws people in, not just sexually, but emotionally, spiritually. In the most intimate experiences, it's not the loud moments that stay etched in memory. It's the still ones. That second when everything slows, breath sinks, and you lock eyes in silence. That bows before a kiss, where your gaze says, "I want you," before your mouth ever does. That moment in conflict when you stop talking and just look, not to intimidate, but to connect. That silence becomes sacred, because it's in those wordless seconds that the most honest truths are exchanged. And those are the moments that linger long after the physical connection ends. Even outside of physical intimacy, eye contact sets the tone for how you relate emotionally. If you're in a conversation and you drop your gaze when things get too real, you're signaling that you're not fully available. But if you hold their eyes softly, steadily, you're saying, "I'm not afraid of this. I can handle your depth. I can handle mine." That kind of energy is rare because most people are still learning to tolerate vulnerability. They rush to fix it, avoid it, or intellectualize it. But when you let your eyes do the talking, you bypass the noise and go straight to the soul. Your gaze becomes a reflection of your boundaries, your openness, and your desire. It tells someone where your attention is, where your truth lives, and how deeply you're willing to go. You can shut someone down with a single look. You can invite them in with even less. When you learn to communicate through your eyes, your whole presence becomes a language, one that doesn't need punctuation or performance, just intention. You can say, I'm not impressed without moving your lips. You can say, I want you without touching a thing. You can say, don't cross that line with a single glance. And when your eyes are anchored in emotional truth, when they're not grasping or begging, but steady and full of choice, people remember, they feel seen in a way that startles them. And that seeing, being held by someone's eyes, is what creates lasting emotional and physical memory. In a world full of distractions, shallow attention, and disconnected intimacy, the one who holds eye contact unshaken, intentional, and unafraid is the one who owns the connection, because your voice may be silenced, your words may be misunderstood, but your gaze, your steady, focused, unflinching gaze, never lies. In a world obsessed with instant gratification, rapid-fire connection, and constant noise, the ability to pause, truly pause within intimacy is rare. Most people rush through moments, chasing pleasure without presence, skipping over nuance in favor of intensity. But what they don't realize is that real seduction, real emotional gravity, is born in the pause. It's in the breath before the kiss, the silence between words, the stillness between touches. The pause is not empty, it is everything. It is where tension builds, where curiosity deepens, where the heart and body synchronize in ways that words could never accomplish. And in relationships, the person who understands the power of that space becomes unforgettable. Most women have been conditioned to believe that being desirable means doing more, giving more, saying more, pleasing more, proving more. But that conditioning robs them of their deepest power. Because what if the opposite is true? What if the moment you slow down, the moment you stop filling every space with effort, the moment you allow silence to breathe between you and another, that's the moment real intimacy begins. It's not in the flurry, it's in the restraint. In relationships, the woman who moves with deliberate stillness, who lets her energy linger, who doesn't rush to be understood, becomes a gravitational force. Sexually, the pause is where everything intensifies. Not because you're withholding, but because you're building anticipation. When you stop rushing to the next touch, the next kiss, the next high, and instead linger in the present moment, the energy shifts, eye contact deepens, breathing synchronizes, sensation becomes richer. Every movement becomes magnified. You don't even have to move to be seductive. You just have to be fully there, in the space between movement. You become the experience instead of the performer, and your partner begins to feel something they don't normally feel in everyday life. Depth, emotional, physical, and energetic depth. And once someone tastes that kind of slowness, that kind of intentional pacing, they never forget it. Even in conversation, the pause becomes your secret weapon. When most people talk, they scramble to be heard, to prove, to fill the silence. But when you pause before answering a question, when you let your words land before continuing, when you let silence sit between you and another, you shift the power. You are no longer reacting. You are responding with control. And that control doesn't come from being distant. It comes from being centered. The pause says, I'm not afraid of stillness. I'm not afraid to feel. I'm not afraid to let you feel me without rushing to explain it. There is also a deep psychological intimacy in the pause. When someone gets used to the rhythm of your energy and you suddenly stop, not with anger, not with avoidance, but with intentional silence, they feel it. They feel the pull. They feel the tension. Because in a relationship, most people are chasing feedback loops. But when you pause, you interrupt the pattern. That interruption forces awareness. It calls the other person into presence. They start noticing your breath, your body, the space around them. They slow down, not because you asked them to, but because your energy demanded it, without a word. The pause is where you hold your boundaries without confrontation. It's where you invite someone in without chasing. It's where you give them room to step forward if they're ready. And if they're not, you stay still. You don't fill the gap for them. You don't rush in to fix the discomfort. You let it be. That's emotional mastery. That's seductive patience. That's the energy of someone who knows that their presence is the offering, and that if someone can't meet them in stillness, they can't handle them in motion. In relationships, the person who controls the pacing of emotional energy controls the depth of the connection. Most people bond through adrenaline fights, makeups, intense confessions. But true bonding happens in the quiet. In the night drives where nothing is said, in the shared silence of two bodies curled together. In the moment where tears come and no one rushes to fix it, they just sit with it. The pause is where intimacy breathes. And if you've ever had someone sit with you in your stillness and not try to change it, you know how deeply that touches something primal, something ancient, something real. The pause also reflects self-trust. When you can hold a beat before reacting, before touching, before opening up too quickly, you're showing that you trust yourself to sit in discomfort. You're not rushing to soothe. You're allowing sensation, emotion, energy to rise and settle. That is rare. That is sacred. In physical connection, this might look like stopping during intimacy, not out of rejection, but out of reverence, slowing your breath, locking eyes, feeling the space instead of filling it. That moment will speak louder than any climax ever could. And yes, the pause is uncomfortable for most because it reveals what's really there when all the motion stops. But that's what makes it so powerful. Most people run from it. But if you can stay, if you can linger in that space where the silence feels like it's vibrating, where your heart is beating, and theirs is too, and there are no distractions, you become the calm they never knew they needed. You become the invitation they never knew they were waiting for. You become unforgettable, not because you did more, but because you allowed more to happen in less.